It's Sunday, and I am gonna make a lasagna. This is gonna be partially a leftovers meal because I'm going to use some ragu that I made months ago and have kept in the freezer. I'm cooking out of this Eric Funke book, American's Felino, which is a really pretty book and has some great recipes. What I'm making today is this. Here you have the spread of him making it, but it's a spinach and Bolognese a lasagna. So it's just like bechamel and Bolognese and Parmesan and noodles made with spinach, which is something I've never done before. I've never made spinach pasta, and I've been sort of like going back and forth between whether or not I want to follow his recipe for it or rely on my usual pasta dough, because I've tried the pasta doughs in this book and I find them really hard to work with, and they're geared toward like rolling by hand, which I'm not going to do. So instead I'm going to sort of I'm just going to jam together a couple of different recipes and turn the egg pasta dough in Mark Vetri's Mastering Pasta into a spinach dough, and we'll just see how it goes. But this is just like my go-to recipe and I feel really comfortable with it, and we don't have that much time to screw around anyway. So I've got some water boiling over here to blanch the spinach. Well, it's not boiling yet, but it will be. I'm soaking the spinach, and I have this ragu that I pulled from the freezer. It's Bolognese that I like ground all the meat for and did a bunch of work on months ago, probably longer than I should have kept it in the freezer, but whatever. And then we'll just make a bechamel, and I've got a nice little lasagna pan that I haven't tried out yet. So that's the agenda, and when this water comes to a boil, we'll move on with it. All right, the water is practically boiling, and I need to set up a little icing station because we're just going to blanch the spinach for like 45 minutes or so, or 45 seconds or so, just to cook the stems through, and then throw it in the ice water. All right, that's good. Spinach. Yeah, so the method in the Funky book is to combine the blanched spinach with eggs in a blender, the eggs that you're going to add to the pasta, and puree it so that there's not like a lot of texture in the stems. But I guess you can't puree it for too long because you'd start to cook the eggs. And we're just going to do that and straight up add it to a double recipe of the other egg dough and see what happens. I think the only thing that might really have a downside is the recipe that I like to use uses semolina flour, which is yellow, and will probably make the green color a little less fun than it could have been if I only used white flour. I need to get some more fine sea salt. Not quite. I'm gonna use this to cook the pasta later, so I might as well salt it now. I'm just gonna do a couple of batches so they have plenty of room. Not quite sure how to test this. Yeah. I haven't made a lasagna in forever. I have gone through many periods of making fresh pasta at home and using different recipes and books. It has been from time to time one of my favorite things to make at home. I haven't really done a lot of it lately. I went through a couple of years where I was making fresh pasta, you know, once a week at least. Like every Saturday I would make something different. And that's a fun habit. I feel like bread baking kind of displaced it. Like there's only so much room for starches in my life. It seems like too much to be making a lot of fresh pasta and a lot of bread and pizza. All of my eating is organized around starch. All right. That ought to be all right. Okay, while that's chilling, we will get going on the pasta. The ingredients of the pasta will be, give me some lights, 00 flour, although you can use all-purpose flour if that's what you got, and semola or semolina, and olive oil, and just a ridiculous amount of eggs. We're gonna use 18 egg yolks in this because I'm making a double recipe. This is gonna be a big old lasagna. I don't know why I'm making this the week of Thanksgiving, but that's what I'm doing. Here, I'm gonna dry this out and use this for the eggs. God, I'm gonna have to come up with something to do with all these egg whites. There are only so many Ramos gin fizzes one can make. I will, if cornered, make a egg white omelet, but it's not my fave. Oh, it's the chicken news. 6, 12, what did I say, 18? Isn't that like a whole, what am I doing here? I guess I'm just making sure I use these eggs in order. This is 18 eggs. All right, I'm gonna probably speed through this a bit. Having some amount of egg white in it is fine. In fact, the recipe in the Funky book, the recipe that I'm not doing, one of the things that weirds me out is it's like, you know, you measure out whole eggs and then you kind of remove egg whites to taste. So it's based on like having a weight measured amount of eggs. And when I've made it before, I felt kind of confused about like how much egg white to leave in. And the egg whites are obviously necessary for the dough since it doesn't have semolina flour in it, because the egg whites will give it more like the bite. So it's like a weirdly specific recipe in that it's all weights, but then leaves out the very important detail of what percentage of that egg weight should be yolk versus white. But I think, you know, he's all about like representing the traditions of the Bologna area where he went to live and learn from some master pasta maker. And then he also trained under a Japanese guy who is like a super exacting Sfolino, I think that's the word. And I mean, that kind of stuff always appeals to me. I don't know why, like, ever since I was younger, like the idea of mastering things sounds really great. I mean, the book I'm cooking this pasta dough from is called Mastering Pasta. Maybe later I'll make a gin fizz on camera. It's like the most delicious drink on earth. And he uses egg whites, sorry. Oh boy, we've made a mess. All right, I'll be right back. All right, hoo-hoo. I'm gonna use this bowl for mixing the pasta. Some folks like to mix pasta on the countertop, but I just find that sort of needlessly risky when you can use a bowl, especially a giant bowl like this. Are you giving me kisses? Oh, woohoo! We'll let this drain on the towel and then squeeze the hell out of it to get it super dry. That's supposed to be the idea. Doesn't matter if there's a little liquid in there. All right, so we're doubling the recipe. It's normally 170 grams of 00 flour. So double that is 340, right? 340. Refill it in a sec. And the single recipe is 55 grams of semola flour or semolina flour, so that's 110 for double. We'll mix that together. And make a well in the center.
We're gonna go this way.
And then there's a tablespoon of olive oil, wherever my jigger is. A tablespoon of olive oil. Since it's a double, we're gonna do 2 tablespoons. And then we're gonna just hold off on adding any water until after we blend the eggs with the spinach and see what the texture looks like. I'll go ahead and put the olive oil in with the eggs. All right, squeeze the spinach dry. It's really not very much spinach. I mean, that's always that's my take on spinach in general. Every time I cook it, I'm like, oh. It called for 8.5 ounces of spinach in the original recipe. This is like 7 and something, but my doubling of the other recipe doesn't make quite as much pasta, so I'm just sort of, whatever. I mean, you can only be so exact, right? Where I always wanted to get with pasta was to a place where I can just sort of feel it out, which with the dough that I'm using, normally I can make it work no matter what. All right, toss that in, and I'm betting that we're not going to add a whole lot of water. Oops. All right, I'm going to pour this into the middle of our well. Get a fork. So you just start working in flour from the edges of the well. This looks pretty. I hope it stays this green. And then it starts to kind of chunk up a bit, and the fork becomes a little bit less useful. And that is when you have to start using your hands. Clear a little space. I did clean my countertop before starting this endeavor, because we are going to end up on the countertop, of course. Set that aside. And try to just cut in the flour. We might actually have to add some flour versus, you know, adding water, which is what I would have done at this point in the non-spinach dough. But we'll see. It's definitely easier to add flour than it is to add water. If you get to kneading your dough and it's really dry, it's so hard to work water into it, especially if you've been kneading it for a while. Yeah. I'm gonna sprinkle some flour in. My hands are dirty, but I'm gonna transfer this to the glass afterwards anyway. What I'm looking for is for the dough to be nice and soft, but not sticking to the, if it leaves dough behind on the countertop, then it's definitely too wet, and then it'll stick. I'm gonna use a machine. It would stick in my machine if I used it that way. It's still sticking a little bit. Sure is pretty though. We're adding quite a bit of flour. That feels about right. It's not like leaving it on the counter anymore. I mean, it's still clinging to the counter, but it's not leaving behind anything. I love kneading pasta dough. I love kneading dough in general, but I mean, kneading pasta dough is like the most relaxing of all cooking tasks. If you're looking for something to calm you down, eating pasta will calm you down. Making pasta will calm you down. It's a general Xanax of food. You can't really over knead pasta, so you don't have to worry about that. Just do it as long as you feel like. Technically it's ready when you depress your thumb and it doesn't bounce back, so it's already ready. But I see that this is still sticking, so I'm still gonna add a little more. It's important when you make pasta though to just recognize that whatever recipe you're following doesn't take into account your environment or your ingredients, how old your flour is. You know, older flour has less moisture in it than fresh flour, things like that, humidity in the air. You really can't just like slavishly follow the recipe or you'll end up heartbroken. And there are many heartbreaks of pasta. It's definitely something that I've fucked up a bajillion times, but almost always in a way that is still edible and enjoyable. So it's worth taking the risk and occasionally being rewarded by something really fantastic. All right, now I'm just gonna pull it into a ball and wrap it up tightly with some cling wrap. Ooh, it's so pretty. I'm really enjoying that. I need someone to teach me how to use cling wrap. Oops. Oh. All right, so that's gonna hang out for 30 minutes and relax. It absolutely has to relax. If you try to roll it right now, it'll just keep on bouncing back. So I'm gonna give it 30 minutes, clean up my mess, and maybe before the 30 minutes is entirely done, I will get the bechamel going. I don't know, we'll see, but I'll be right back. All right, it's been resting for 45 minutes actually. And it's time for us to get to work on this. I'm gonna divide it into 4 pieces to make it easier to work with. We'll do four long sheets and then chop them up. I'm gonna keep these covered while I'm working on this one. I'm gonna lay down a little bit of flour. It'll work its way in. All right, that ought to go in the machine just fine. A little nervous about it sticking, so be cautious. The thickness for this recipe is defined as 9 Post-it notes, which I don't really, this whole book has like pasta thicknesses based on stacks of Post-it notes, which, I don't know, maybe that sounded like an understandable measure or unit of measure when the book was written, but to me it's just like complete nonsense. I have noticed that the thickness is thicker than what he prescribes for like tagliatelle, so I'm gonna go with a little bit thicker. I don't know why I just ran this through at the same thickness. My usual place for this machine for making like filled pastas is 4. So I might stop at 3 and leave it kind of thick. Although I'm a little nervous about thick lasagna dough because I feel like that makes the crispy parts kind of hard, at least in my experience with making lasagna. I think I will stop at 3. Need to flour a space for it. These are supposed to just dry for a little while before we cook them in the boiling water. This one's pretty long. Get out of here, hair. I'm just gonna let that hang off the edge, or maybe I'm afraid to cut it because I'm not sure exactly how long. This is about as long as the pan is. I'll just take a chance. All right, I'm going to roll out the rest of the sheets and meet you back. Okay, I got the pasta sheets all rolled out and I cut them into pieces that I hope will fit well in this lasagna pan. And they're supposed to dry for a little bit before we cook them in the water. And now I'm just grating an absolutely absurd amount of Parmesan Reggiano. I'll just speed this up. I'm gonna call that good. The water's boiling over here. We already salted it for the spinach, so I think we're good on that. And these are the ones that have sat out longest, so I'm gonna start with, I'm just gonna do these one at a time. Cook them for 30 seconds. Uh-oh. I might have to use my spider. Just let it cool. Move on to the next one. There we go. So slippery. Thanks. Ouch. These are a bit longer than my towels.
Can you say what it is that you need? Lola, okay. Well, since you put it that way, I would love to get you some Lola. Lola.
Try not to catch that towel on fire. All right, so you get the general idea. I'm just gonna be doing this for a while, so I'll come back to you. All right, so I got all of the pasta sheets par cooked, and I'm gonna quickly make the bechamel. We need all-purpose flour. He actually calls for using 00 flour in this too, but what am I, made of money? And a stick of butter. Not sure if I can really conceptualize this as a stick. I think I will just open a new one. We'll need this, and this is a sauce whisk, which will help because we're gonna basically toast the flour in the butter. Okay, I might have gotten the pan a little excessively warm for the cold butter. That's all right, we're good. And we need a cup of flour. That's gonna be our cup. I also went ahead and heated up the ragu, the Bolognese, just to the point of being like room temperature, so it wouldn't drag down the heat of the lasagna as a whole as it goes in the oven. And the oven's at 375, so it's ready to bake. This is the last thing, and then we'll put it together, put it in the oven. I'm just gonna go ahead and start adding flour. You're supposed to kind of sprinkle it. Add a little bit at a time. This is the part where this whisk starts grabbing everything. You're just really trying to toast the flour, like the flour's raw, and you need to cook it. Otherwise you'll have that like gross underbaked bread taste. I can see now why a regular whisk might be the thing for this particular moment. I'm just gonna use my spoon. Ah, I can smell that it's getting kind of toasty smelling. I mean, it's been kind of toasty smelling, but I think we're at a good spot. So now I'm gonna start adding a little bit of milk, which this is my, measuring cup that I can pour a quart into, but it's the worst for streaming. There we go. It's really impossible to stream anything out of it. This is really fucking ridiculous, honestly. Just gonna set that there. Not really sure what the best approach for this is. This is crazy. God. And I have used the dumbest whisk possible. It's never too late to course correct. I'll just have to try to add that. Somewhere on the internet, a Frenchman is laughing at me very loudly. I'm gonna switch back to this and see if I can use some of the flour that we left out. And of course I've dropped my tasting spoon. I'm gonna add salt and nutmeg. Like a teaspoon of salt. And okay. I didn't actually get a tasting spoon. I think it needs to cook a little bit more. Yeah. It's gravy, you know? Now let's put this thing together. Okay, so bottom layer, gonna do a little bit of the Bolognese, which this is, by the way, this is the sauce that I made a while back and it's been in the freezer, and it's a fun recipe to make, but it's pretty elaborate. Like, I would never make it just to make this lasagna. It involved like grinding a bunch of my own meat and cooking for half a day. It's a cool recipe. I'd make it again because it makes a lot and saves really nicely, but it would be a crazy video to include that as well. It would be like a 3-hour long video. So a little bit of both on the bottom layer, and there should be 5 layers according to my calculations, so hopefully. And I laid out the longest ones to be the bottom, so that I can kind of wrap it like a package, or leave a little bit of rough stuff hanging up to crisp up. Get you. Alright, now, is this really what I was using? Why is it so clean? No, it wasn't what I was using. Oh well. Another bit of the ragu, which I feel like I have a little less ragu than recipe calls for, unfortunately. I can't remember. It calls for half of the full recipe that I made a while ago. I think I've eaten more than half of it, but I can't really remember how much I've had. I made tagliatelle with it a few times. Okay, let's just not get confused. And now, as we layer, there'll be Parmesan. Scads of it. I wonder if I should cut as I go here and create some extra layers, maybe. Trying not to have parts that overlap. A bit of sauce. Alright, and it's going to go in for 30 minutes, and then I'll take the aluminum foil off, and it'll finish for another 30 minutes. So, see you then. Alright, let's see how this is looking. I turned on the broiler to get a little bit more browning, because I checked it a bit ago, and it was just not doing it for me. But this looks just about right. Yowza. Okay, so that looks great, but I just want to let you guys know that it is almost 9 o'clock, and I have a 7-year-old and a 2-year-old who have not eaten dinner. So before you consider making such a thing, maybe plan your day better than I did. I will cut to after. I'm gonna rest this for 15 minutes, because once it's 9 o'clock and your children haven't eaten, it doesn't really matter anymore. So I'm gonna rest this for 10 minutes at least before I cut it, and when I cut it, I'll come back and show you what's inside. All right, it's been sitting for a while. I'm gonna cut it. I've been thinking about what to use. I'm gonna try using this crazy bread knife. You know, like, more cookbooks should come with like instructions for how to cut a lasagna. I've never actually received that wisdom. I got some plates heating up. So these edges are like nice and crisp. I'm just gonna cut a small piece. Oh, that's ridiculous. Here. Yeah, this is going right through. It's like I left part of it.
It's not drying up. It's drying up, but it's not falling off.
Yeah. I read the sheet. It said 5 to 10 days. I think he's doing all right.
All right. So there we go. Am I getting this? I'm not gonna take a bite because everyone's super hungry, but I'll let you know later. All right. Thanks for watching. See ya.